A Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. This week's episode of Build Hatch is an absolute beauty. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I got to sit down with Michael Rodgerson from MPR Build in Melbourne. This week's conversation was one of those ones that covered a lot of ground. So if you're running a small or medium construction company and want to make it to be with the big guns, then this is it. Like I said, we covered a lot of ground and talked about the process of starting out all the way to creating your own brand and marketplace. Michael and his team are doing wonderful projects around Melbourne for leading designers and architects. But above all, his business covers both the top end of building, but also the all-important market of dealing with medium density and single one-off projects. And that's because he genuinely loves it. Like I said, this was one of those chats that covered the complete process. So let's get into it. All right, so Michael Rodgerson from MPR Design and Build. Welcome to Build Hatch.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate you having me on the show.
That's okay. Look, I was really looking forward to this one, and I say that every week just about, but the reason being is MPR Design and Build. You guys are one of Melbourne's premier builders and building some incredible homes. Like all our guests, before we hear about the MPR Design and Build story, we always like to go back in time and find out about our guest history. So, Michael, whereabouts did you grow up?
Yeah, so pretty local, the Glen Ira area, so more towards Bentley, so just over the highway, which I grew up there through primary school and high school. Married a Bentley East girl and moved down the road basically and hung around here ever since.
So what about your childhood? What was that like growing up?
It was pretty good. Most people think coming from this business, I've inherited it from my old man or a family member, as a lot of people do, because I'm still quite young. My father was actually a chef, and my mother. They both
chefs.
Yeah, well, mum's technically not a trained chef, but worked through restaurants with my old man growing up. So they owned restaurants on Toorak Road. Dad was actually originally a chef on a ship because he came from England. I think it was called the Oriana, which was the QE2's baby sister. They called it.
Really?
He worked there for about 15 years. Met my mum in Australia, and never got back on the ship. So that
a love boat story.
A love boat story. Exactly. I think sometimes you might speak to him now. He goes, I wish I went back on the ship. But that's all in the history.
So hardworking parents.
Hardworking
Chefs
parents.
are incredibly hardworking people.
Yeah, my dad would leave home at 6 a.m, and he would most likely get home at 11, 12, nearly 7 days a week. And if he did have a break between the lunch, it would be he'd go for a walk or do something like that, but very rarely.
So once you leave home for the kitchen, you're pretty much there.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to be a chef because I worked in the kitchens with the old man, and I remember he just grabbed me by the shirt and he goes, "Don't do it." And I had good opportunities, because my father was trained in Europe, so he had friends in France and all these Michelin star chefs that I could have gone to, and I'm pretty grateful that I didn't take that opportunity in the end. It was funny the way I got into the carpentry side of this business was I actually played. I went after school. I moved to America for a year, did some snowboarding, and as all kids do, they just want to forget about school,
let loose, discover the world.
A leap year.
A leap year. That's right.
But I had no real intentions in going back to school either because I wasn't very academic back then. So I came back and was coming into a senior footy club. Who basically said, if you hang around, we'll give you an apprenticeship. But they were a tier 1 company. And I had to go do what we call a pre-app at the school. And as I started doing it, we're doing more domestic work there. And then occasionally we'll do what the tier 1 guys would do. We'll do a bit of shoring and concrete work. And I was thinking, I don't know about this sort of gig. It's more like a concreter. So when I finished the course, the footy club said, "You ready to jump in?" And I said, I'll hang about. I'll just see some other options. One of the teachers said, you finished really well. Made contact with a local builder in my area and had an interview with him. And I said, I'll continue playing footy, but I'll go more towards the domestic field, which again was probably the best decision I ever made. Because the guys I did play footy with just really sat on a broom for 2 or 3 years and, became form workers. And you try and get a couple of commercial guys come to a domestic side, it's sometimes a bit of a comedy show.
Yeah, they're different beasts, aren't they?
100%. It's not the same. It's just not, And the good thing about my guy I worked with, he was a builder, so it wasn't a carpentry crew. He was a builder from start to finish. So we saw demo, plumbing, electrical.
So you got that exposure to
everything.
lots of trades.
Footings. We used to do our own footings, pitch our roofs, help out, sparkies, roof tilers, strip roofs, cut roofs in. So you got a real good gauge of what a builder is, not just a carpenter that'll come in, do a frame, lock up, fix, go to the next one and just keep doing that. And the funny story is my old boss turned to me and he goes, "Don't be a builder." And I said, "What's wrong with being a builder?" And then, so he was just more of an old school sort of guy. He was a great tradesman, brilliant. When you finish your trade, you sort of don't know what you're like compared to other people because you've been in that little bubble and you think, "Oh, am I any good? Or my doors, do I don't do it?" And then when you finally get out and you work with other people that you've, grew up with and you go, "Oh, maybe this guy actually taught me quite well," because you feel like you're a little bit ahead of them.
Yeah, it's not until you have those conversations and work out too. Like often you'll find, particularly apprentices, that all they've ever done is, I don't know, commercial fit outs or all they've ever done is framing. They're not having that exposure to
Definitely
hanging doors.
Just as hanging a door.
The detail of architraves ready for your painter to come in. Like
just
the detailed finishes.
Yeah, because like I said, the guy used to work, he was a big smoker and he always have these little papers in his pocket and you do a fix and you do like a stain fix. So sometimes we'd have like a 12-step architrave, these big Victorian homes. And you'd carry this little block plane, a little hand plane, and you'd have to like make it all fit. And he'd pull out that little little paper, and he'd walk up to all your miters, and he'd sort of go, "Oh yeah, that's a pass." I
love that.
You'd be sweating bullets all day. You're thinking, but sometimes you feel like you'd be on the whole day on one window because he put that little bit of, some say fear, but some would also say just that execution and pride. And I think a lot of people these days with MDF, they'll just get a drop saw, cut it, whack it on, a 5mm gap, the paint will bog that, and just go on to the next one. I think today it's very just sort of price driven. That's why I've always avoided square meter and linear meter rates on sites. I think it's a bad habit for young trades to get into. They'll just work out, okay, there's 200 linear meters of a fix, and they'll pull their drop saw out and just go, "Oh, we're done." You're done in 2 days, and you're looking at going, it's leaning over about 10mm. You got a 3mm quirk down and 8mm quirk at the other end, but that's what the industry sometimes has driven it to, which I don't always think is a good thing for it. I believe just in getting the job done right, and if it costs a bit more, cost a bit more. Yeah,
look, I love that, and that's a great analogy that whether something passes the Durry test,
Yeah, the old Durry test. And he'd come at the end of the day and the other guy would just be sweating bullets thinking, is it good enough? He'd get the sandpaper and try and, fill it a little bit if it wasn't, but it was good.
But that's it. I mean, even looking back, I think most, particularly young people listen to this or anyone really, if you have a cranky boss in construction, instead of looking at it in terms of, he's giving me a hard time, it's not often until down the track that you look back on time and think, well, that 100%. Guy actually made me a better person or a better craftsman.
100%. And I've actually called him after my time, years down there, because I still speak to him, and I actually, said thank you for what you've done. Because it's like watching, that Gordon Ramsay on TV. He screams his head off at everyone, but everyone wants to work for him.
That's right.
Because they know he's a talented chef and he's got the accolades. And you see these guys and you're thinking, I used to watch that show when I was a kid. I don't know how you feel, mate. But you sort of think they're sticking it out because they know when they get to the end, when they go to a restaurant overseas and go, "Where'd you do your time?" They go, "I was taught by Gordon Ramsay." You're ahead of the pack.
Absolutely.
So it's you just got to sometimes wear that. Whereas I worked with another guy at the same time, and he didn't have a hard enough skin, and it affected him later with his confidence. He would work together and he goes, "Oh, you reckon that's right?" And he'd go over it 500 times. I go, "Pull the drop saw down. It's good."
Yeah.
But sometimes if you're not built that way, it can go the other way.
Absolutely. I think that's also having that emotional intelligence and foresight to separate that and think, well, this is this is what he wants. Yeah. It's not personal.
Correct.
I've learnt this. I've done it. I might have stuffed up 1 or 2 times, but that's it. Now it's time. Game on. I've got to get it right.
100%.
All right, so working away as a young chippy, working for this tier 1 builder, what sort of led you on to other career options after that?
So when I actually finished my time, I was only around 22, I think, when I finished my apprenticeship. And I started taking an interest into sort of, home renovations, and it's when all those shows started kicking off back in the day. And I thought, well, I'm going to just apply for my registration here and see how we go. And everyone said, no, you're too young, you don't have the experience. So I waited about another year, and I worked for this guy still on and off as a subby. And I put the application in. I was a DBU by 24.
That's a great achievement.
Probably I think the guy that interviewed me said you're back then one of the youngest in the state. So I took that, grabbed my ticket, and just worked my way up every year. Just try to add a little bit more on the insurance, and a little bit more.
Like, did you leave once you got your DBU? Did you sort of set up shop straight away, or did you have some contacts?
No, I did. I set up shop straight away, but it wasn't. I don't want young guys to think you're going to get your DBU and you're going to sign a $2 million home. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
No. So I started off with some bathroom renos and, smaller renos of around 100 to 100. And at the same time, you're very restricted when you get your sort of letter of eligibility of what you can jump straight into. You've got to prove every year you can increase. So I started doing the smaller stuff. And I kept a bit of a carpentry crew going at the same time, just to sort of fill the void. And then, I don't know, just contacts and people you met along the way offer you maybe like a small Calbung home worth 400 or 500, and you do that, and it gets a little bit of notice, and then you do a double story, get for about 700, gets a bit of notice, and all of a sudden, in the area you get a little bit of notice. I was always based in East Bentley in the office, and I moved to Brighton about 7 years ago. Again, I ended up building a house in Brighton, and then once I built that house, I thought, well, I've now got something to show in the area, because back then it was very hard to be it's only across the road, literally the highway. But I feel like when you're even when I had a display home years ago in Bentley East, and to try and get people from Brighton across the highway to look at Bentley East was like, I'll come. But no one ever came. It's like it's this dark portal they just can't get across there. That way they'll go, but that way they'll struggle. So I built the house in Brighton, and I started getting a few more not contacts, but a few phone calls from that house from people in the area. And I thought, well, maybe it might be time to set an office up in Bayside. There wasn't too many builders at the time in Bayside. So I set the office up, and ever since then, we sort of go down from Blackrock, Sandry, Hampton, all the way down to Toorak, and just follow that path, Malvern, Glen Iris.
And for anyone listening to this outside of Victoria that doesn't know, these are sort of top premier suburbs in Melbourne and Bayside. So right around Port Phillip Bay, which, incredible spot. Yeah. Beautiful, large houses.
Yeah. They're usually, the majority of your top end architects are designing these homes for these people. They're ranging anywhere from 2 to 10 mil.
Did you specifically sort of set out and target that Brighton demographic and that market back then?
Back when I started, no, because it was unachievable. It's like you just get your DBU and you decide to call, Travis Walton Architecture, and go, I'm ready. And he goes, well, show us your portfolio. And you go, no, I don't have one yet, but I'm really ready. And he's going, I don't want to be the bloke, copping the back end from the client here. I'll work your way up. Give me a call in a few years. So I just targeted. I didn't really have a target. I was really just more putting it out to people in the area looking for new homes, extensions, renovations, and multi-res. And when I say multi-res, it was only more the old side-by-side. I wasn't interested in doing basements and 4 stories at that point in time. And then over time, we just started taking more sort of jobs on. Then some came with basements. And I started, building maybe, I think now we've probably done about 12 basements in 3 years. It seems to be a pretty common theme in the houses we build around here, with pool and lift. Everything goes sorted together. Once I set myself up in Brighton, started just targeting this area to start with, and a little bit down towards that more Bayside area. And then I started targeting more that Malvern, Glen Iris, Toorak area. And again, going to Brighton is a stepping stone, but trying to crack Toorak's another stepping stone. It's like these are where you make your bones a little bit, and then you got to try and make it over to there, because you're going to go up against builders that have been around in that area for 20, 30 years. Davis Henderson's and these guys, Leone Constructions, Visioneer, all those big boys are out there. So, you want to prove yourself here and then make your way up there, because those people will want to see a portfolio before they commit to an $8 million home.
Straight away, what stands out with you is I love the foresight, that age particularly to realise that, you need to create the foundations and the stepping stones in order to play with the big boys.
Yeah, correct.
And for anyone listening to this, that's an important and essential ingredient for any sort of business success, and particularly in construction. It just comes back to fundamentals and the old saying of you need to crawl before you can walk and then walk before you can run.
Yeah, correct. I've had the lucky opportunity to sit down with some of these established companies as not so much a mentor, but just to sort of, pick their brain a little bit on how. And what people got to understand is these guys started at exactly the same spot as a young bloke coming through the system now. They didn't get registered and walk in a Toorak and go, where's my $10 million contracts? They started doing the renos, the back gardens.
They earned their stripes.
100%. And I just want to make sure any sort of young guy coming into the industry not to be disheartened if after 1 or 2 or 3 years he's not seeing those big tickets, if that's the path they want to go down. If they want to stick to just a single dwellings or dual locks, whatever they want to do, it's fine. But if you do think you want to get into that side of the industry, you've got to be patient. You can't just say, well, I've been doing this for 3 years now. Where's my turn? Because it just won't work that way. It just won't.
All right. So tell us about MPR Design and Build. So design and build. So you obviously do both design and construction.
Yeah. So a few years back, we got into a little bit of design. We had an architect we used to work very closely with. And we thought, we had a lot of people come in, knock on the door and say, where do we start? If we type in Google architect, we'll get 1,000 architects. Who do we know who's going to charge what? And on top of that, we had a lot of clients come into us with drawings fully detailed, which was great, and would price it and would say, it's for a number, it's 4 million. And they'd look at you and their jaw would just hit the table and you go, about right? They go, we told the architect 2 million was our budget, or something along those lines. And it's not the architect's fault. They're not in the industry all day pricing footings and things like that. They work to what they believe is that sort of figure. So we thought, what if we put something out into the public that said, you come to us, you say this is our budget, 1.5 to 2.5, and we'll design you that home for that budget. Now, at the first go at it, you might be a little bit over, and then you do a little bit of value management, but we're not going to be 100% over. We're going to be maybe 200 over, 100 over. And we're very transparent in saying, you can bring me 100 photos from Instagram and Pinterest, and I can tell you either 95 of them are going to be a no, because you're showing me Kirribilli House, or you're showing me and then you're telling me your budget. So there's no point engaging, designing, knowing you're going to get to the end and be over their budget. You haven't provided the service that you basically told people you're going to provide. Now, in saying that, it involves a lot of marketing point of the business. So it's like you're in two lanes, you're the builder and you're the architect. And sometimes I really enjoy the process in working with architects. I like going in at the start. I like doing the value management with them. I like seeing their designs, giving them ideas as well, because they're always learning. And I felt like sometimes doing it in-house, we lost that part of the business as well, because I think sometimes when an architect sees the design in front of your name, like, oh no, they're a designer as well. So half the other reason why we went into designs, we did a lot of developing. So we did our own developing. And again, we gave it to an architect we work with, and we were able to change things as we went. Just as we if something didn't work at council, we could work that night to change it. It wasn't a process going to another outside architect doing a full change of scope. We could just literally all work on it together and submit it. So that was the main reason why we went down the design path, mainly for our own developments.
Your core function with MPR is
building.
Premier Tier 1 building contractor in Melbourne.
Correct, it's building.
Yeah.
If you said to me tomorrow, you can never design again because you need to be a registered architect designer, I'd say that's fine. We're good.
Yeah.
I'm happy to just stick with the building part.
I think that's good. It's a great practical element to have anyway, regardless, so that you obviously understand with your team how the design element works, creating that sort of in-house for your own projects as a side.
Yeah.
And then your core function as MPR Build is I guess having that knowledge and practical experience and background, so that only helps make you a leading builder in my mind.
Well, that's what we do. So what I do basically, if a tender comes in, I work with my C over the tender. So it doesn't go to an estimator. It doesn't go to an overseas estimator. It stays with me. My point of difference is when I work with some of these architects is I'll say, don't wait till you're ready to tender the project. Get me in a concept. If you've been given a budget from a client, you design something, call me in. I'll give you an hour. I'll give you 10 hours. I'll give you 100 hours of my time, whatever it is. And I think it helps build that sort of relationship with client, architect, builder from the get-go, that the owner feels like they're getting taken through a journey and not going to get to the end of this thing and realise they might not even build it. Because that's the fact. We all know that a lot of these homes get designed and they get put in a filing cabinet in the architect's office and never come to life. And for us, that's really not what we want. We want to see all these homes getting built. So if it means me going into their office and spending time at these stages and just say, hey, there's a better way to design that. Hey, that's not going to work. We're off here. And it's not telling the architect how to do the job at all. They've got their design aspects and obviously things, but it's just making sure when it gets to the tender stage, when that client's all excited, they've got their bundle of paperwork and they look at each other and go, oh, hey, we're going to be building in 6 months. How exciting. But we need another year of value management, or we need to say, rip them up, let's start again. Because if your budget's X and we're at Y and you tell me what can we do to get to X, sometimes there's just no answer to get to X. We can value management anything, and majority of the time we can get a price where it might have to be. But sometimes it's just too far.
It's unachievable.
It's sometimes, and I think that's sometimes where some of these builders will get themselves in trouble, where they'll just sort of gamble it and say, okay, we'll do it. I think we can do it. That word, I think. Don't say I think. Know your numbers. I made mistakes at the start of my career saying, I think we can do it. There's only so many times you'll get bitten on the ass before you realise you can't do it.
That's right.
Right. And I always say you've always got opportunities in this industry. To say the word no is a good thing. Right. You can look at a job and look at it and say, I think it's going to cost X. And you put that straight forward to the client. And that client might turn around and go, oh, you're off your dial, or you're spot on. But to get that out in the open at the start is critical. Because for you to get that and go, yeah, okay, we'll tender it. Tender, it takes a month. It takes a lot of man hours, a lot of your trade hours. And you get to the end of it and you're nowhere near the ballpark. You've wasted their time and they've wasted your time. So you're not trying to say, what's your budget at the start? Tell me your number. And you want to get it out of them and say, right, you told me your budget's 2 million. Here's your quote, 199999. Thank you very much. You just want to make sure that when you look at those drawings, that you're not going to be spending hours and hours at night time away from your family pricing something that's unachievable for your business.
That's right. And I think you mentioned a couple of key things then, which was being approachable. And that's an essential ingredient of success, particularly with design architects in your space, where they equally want to be able to have that rapport and team building approach to things. They don't want some upstart builder that thinks they're too good to tender and things like that. They want that key personal relationship where they can pick up the phone and say, hey, Michael, what do you think about this? Or I've got this project. We're only at concept stage, but I trust your opinion. Can you come over to my office? We'll go through it. I need to get this into council, but I want to make sure that it passes, this pub test and is it realistic? Is it achievable? Like you said, because they equally don't want to waste their time and their hours and look bad as an architect with their client.
Because you got to remember, if you're designing something for someone and the architect misses their budget by $2 million, that person's got friends. Now, when they want to go build their house, this is part of the system they might not see. The architect, they go, okay, it didn't work. But behind scenes, that person could be going to 30, 40 friends going, don't go near Mr. Jimmy. He can't hit a budget. And he's sitting there going, oh, when's my next job coming? His phones are a bit quiet. But in the public, he's got a big X against his name saying it was unachievable. So again, all the architects I'm working with at the moment, I offer that service. And any new architect, I'll offer that service. Again, for me, you're only going to be as good as the homes you build. If you're waiting for 50 tenders a year and 45 aren't getting built, well, you've got to get on the front foot and say, what can we do to change the industry? And if that means engaging with these guys at the start, and I think they really do appreciate it. And I think some other architects are actually thinking, can we actually do that? Because a lot of builders won't actually put that out there for these guys to use that service, because at that stage, your architect's getting paid. Your architect's getting paid to do his, prelims, his design brief, his scope of works. If the builder comes in, they're doing it just to help out. There's no cost involved.
Yeah, they're not getting anything.
We're not getting anything for that.
But I like to look at that as, and you obviously have this foresight and this mature approach to it yourself. I consider that a marketing expense.
100%.
Yeah. So instead of looking at it in a bitter and twisted limelight of, well, I just wasted 2 weeks of my time with that architect, you're actually turning that attitude around and saying, well, I don't mind doing this because
definitely
donating 2 weeks of my time, my valuable time of running a business, actually develops a relationship. Now, you might miss out on that particular job, but there'll be another 5 or 6 every year for the next 20 years.
And that's what it might be as well. There might be, you get to the end of that job and that client has a brother-in-law as a builder or someone else is involved. That's fine. I think those architects will always sort of remember that service you sort of helped them to get that project out the ground. Again, because that might be an award-winning project. That gets built. Poster goes on that architect's wall, Home of the Year. Well, he puts that on his website. People looking for an architect go, hey, he won Home of the Year. Let's go see him.
That's right.
But if he'd started the way he was starting, or she, it may not have even been built. You sort of need each other, I believe.
Well, you mentioned it before, Michael, which I loved hearing, where you said it's about something needs to change and I need to pull my finger out and lead, do something different to make a change or make a positive stance in the industry. Because if I don't do it, well, we're all just going to lose.
Exactly. If everyone takes that same approach, well, we could all just be sitting waiting for tenders that don't get built. So that's always the risk and reward in the industry.
I want to talk to you about making the transition. What separates the difference between, say, a tier 1 builder and a tier 2 builder? I think that's really important.
I guess the main separation is just attention to detail and knowledge. I think to get into that, if we're going to call tier 1, which is more of a construction, but we'll call tier 1 sort of the high end builds, more your Tirac down at Brighton. It just comes down to organisation, knowledge, documentation, and a skillful team. I'd advise anyone that's building $500,000-$600,000 homes, if someone ever approaches you with a 2 to 3 million, never go from that to that.
It's a big leap, isn't it?
It's a massive leap. What you've got to understand, when you're building a smaller valued home, majority of the time it's designed by a draftsman. Okay, so you get the drawings and then you just one-on-one engagement with the client. It's very personal. If you're going to build a home, 5 million, call it, you're going to have an army. And when I say an army, you're going to have architects, junior architects, CAs, interior designers, structural engineers, owners, superintendents that form part of the owner, QS reports from the bank. There's a lot more cooks in the kitchen, right? So you've got to be able to answer a lot of questions along the way. If you don't like reading 400 pages of specifications and documentation, don't jump into it. There's plenty of guys out there that have a great business that would build $800,000 homes a year. To jump into that and feel like you're going to run your business the same way as you've been running, building those 10, you're in for just a rude awakening. It's not for everyone.
And in some ways, if I can use the analogy of you're not actually working as a tradesman or even a builder, you're suddenly becoming a manager.
Correct.
From my experience, a lot of people who take the traditional path into construction where they do an apprenticeship, they become a carpenter, they work for someone else, then they become a builder in inverted commas and they're building single houses or duplexes. But then to go beyond, like you said, dealing with these army of people that are there to work on behalf of the owner and the bank and all these different parties, all of a sudden you're not building in that traditional sense. You're managing at the built environment, really.
100% you are. And again, the last time I put my nail bag on was probably 3-4 years ago. And I put it on a couple of times and the boys like to get a photo now.
Yeah, they like to pay you out for it.
And there's some days that I would love to put a nail bag on and turn the phone off and just hammer away. just put some frames together, hang a door. But the reality is, the reason why I put the bag away was if I did that, I wouldn't sleep. I'd work 7 days a week, 24/7, because the phone would be ringing and the suppliers would be asking for orders. And you physically can't run a building company. I always say to people, if you are on the tools and you want to take that next step in the building company, you've got to find a way to get off them. You can't wear too many hats in this industry because you'll sink. And when I say sink, it's not from financial point of view, but you will emotionally and physically sink. You can't work on the tools from 7 till 4, come home, order 4 projects worth of materials, invoice, banking, anything else, do your site inductions, do safety, do all those other things, and then quote on top. You'll never be able to do it. So what will happen is you'll think, oh, great, we're on the tools, we're going well here. And then all of a sudden you're at lockup and the boys goes, where are we going next? And you're like, oh, I haven't quoted anything. And you've got to run back home and try and find a job. So my advice would be, you just got to find a way to get a good team around you. You don't need 20 guys. I used to have 16 full-time carpenters as well as managers, and you don't need that. You really want to minimise that sort of overheads weekly, and the super and the work cover and things like that. So there are plenty of good subcontractor crews you can bring in, and when you're quiet, they go. When you're quiet and you've got full-time employees, you got a bloke sweeping the floor at $60 an hour, sort of hurts a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
It does.
And I'm a big proponent of that. And from my side of the fence, I see a lot of builders struggle where it's just not geared up to apply a formula. If you work out a formula of a certain amount of turnover to go from 2 million to 5 million, and it just doesn't stack up, that the leap from 2 million to 5 million, I'll just put on this many staff. The way it works is you go from 2 million to 5 million, that time spent between 5 to say 8 million is all losing money, making investments,
adjustments,
adjusting people, processes, policies, everything else. You're not making any money from that 5 million. No. And so you might have to spend another 2 years of that before you get to 8 million or say 10 million. Then you start to make money, but then all it takes is a slow payment that's not coming through the door on time. Then that slows up everything else. So all of a sudden you find yourself juggling that. Well, why did I go from 5 million to 8 million to 11 million, whatever it might be? It's just a hard slog, isn't it?
You hit the nail on the head. When I was on my own and I was maybe doing 2 projects a year or 3, and I was running them myself, you felt like you'd had more money in the pocket than running 20 projects sometimes. It's a transition to say, okay, I'm going from here to here, but what do we need from here to here? And I think that's a lot of builders will think about, am I too top heavy? Am I too light? I sometimes speak to builders turn over the same as us, and they've got 18 staff. And I'm thinking, how do you run 18 staff? I've got 6. My boys say we're pretty tight, but there's no point getting into the end of the year and working for a wage. You might as well just become a subby again. You're turning over a lot of money. You're guaranteeing a lot of things for a long time.
There's a lot of risk there.
A lot of risk. I had a client years ago, we got to lock up, and she goes, the bank suspended my payments. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, I've got no money. I think the lockup of this house was about 350 grand. And she goes, do you want to buy the house? I said, not really.
You're not paying me and you asked me to buy a house.
I'm not Richard Branson. Yeah, and luckily enough, she found a family member overseas that was able to help her out. But, I didn't sleep for a week.
That's a hard time of your life, isn't it?
It is. And I was only about 25 back then, 26. I wasn't like, of course it's a hard time. But you can always be one phone call away from that happening. And that's the reality of it. You don't know what's around the corner in this industry. You hope you do your sort of homework at the start and everyone looks at, passes and, but you don't know.
That goes back to, I guess, the foundations and the history of this podcast was the frustration that's out there in the market, in the industry, where things can look good on social media and online, and behind the scenes, it's a completely different story.
Listen, I personally believe building's probably the hardest industry out there. Aaron, you can open up a restaurant. Okay, you've spent all this money, you've opened up this beautiful restaurant, and a guy walks in on the opening night, He goes, Aaron, do not sell more than 20 plates. You go, man, I've got 200 people booked in. 200 plates. If you do 21, I'll be back. And you're like, well, hang on a minute. So every year you invest and you put more time into the business and you're just controlled from a greater party. Because we all know, as a builder, we all know who that party is. So I could literally turn away 8 or 9 clients a year that are ready to go. But everyone's got an insurance policy, and we're going to work to it. So when you start out, you get given basically what they're giving you now as a young bloke as a registration. You would earn 3 times the amount as a subcontractor carpenter, 4 times. They might give you $1 million. Now, if you're running at 10% margin, 100 grand, take out your work cover, take out everything else and this and insurances, I'll make 60 grand. And you've got to guarantee that guy's house for 10 years. And he call you back in 5 years and go, the tiles are falling off the wall, something's happened. So there's no other industry where you have to put all your personal assets online. You got to guarantee all your workers for work cover. You got to guarantee it for 10 years. And they can, adjust your insurance yearly if they want. So it's certainly an industry where it's very controlled from an outer party and it's very restricting.
There's only so much you can do as a builder.
Correct.
I've talked about this on many episodes. It's like you're stirring the pot. You said it before, throwing that army of soldiers into the mix of, you've got everyone over there on the client side, then you've got your issues in your business and your people, and then there's external factors like environmental delays, environmental issues, COVID, neighbourly disputes, traffic control, contaminated material, all these different things that come up. It's such a complicated exercise of building, isn't it?
And I think you went from builder to lawyer, and I'd say most builders now feel like they need some sort of law background because, just recently, protection work notices, I've got to send a file 2 inches thick to 4 different neighbours, and then you're doing just back and forward meetings of what's going on, what's what. And I can certainly say once you get to those better areas of Brighton, Malvern, Toorak, your average neighbour's not a bricklayer.
They might have their army of lawyers.
Right? I've received QC letters. One was the CEO of the Ombudsman's. One's a surgeon. So you sort of up that scale a bit, but you up the neighbours as well. And it's funny, majority of you look and they've got this beautiful home that's probably about 12 months old, and you're just looking at it thinking, I wonder if you cause this much drama as well when you wanted to build your own place. So
yeah, that's right.
That's always happens. But like I said before, if you are comfortable in that area of that, if you want to call it a tier 2, the glitz and glam of going up to that 5, 6, 7, 8, it's not always, beneficial for that person or that business. It's just not, unless you're willing to invest into that small army that you're going to need. Because you're going to need a construction manager to run your day-to-day because you just physically can't. You're going to need a supervisor. And depending on the size of the job, you might need one supervisor for that job. And that bloke might live there for 2 years. When a job of that size of value goes over by 4 months or 2 months because something's happened, and it does, profit chip is just getting every day chipped away at. Every day. Because you're thinking, I can't send anywhere else. He's got to be there.
Yeah.
You've guaranteed that supervisor. And then you've got your CAs going through your paperwork, and you've got nearly a full-time bookkeeper, and you've got labourers. It adds up. Going from me running on my own to this. So you say, okay, you're at 2 million, you're on your own. You've gone to 40 million, but you've added 10 guys, and these guys aren't on 20 grand a year. Like,
it's a huge investment.
A good supervisor is on a good whack,
Plus the super insurances.
Most of them have got cars and stuff like that. But in saying that, without these guys, it doesn't exist. So it's not like you're not angry that you've got to employ. This is the path you've chose, and without these guys, the business doesn't exist. You can be the best builder in Australia, the best of the best. If you don't have a good team around you, you're doomed, absolutely doomed. And it's just even one weak link. You need good, and it's taken me a long time to get good supervisors, and I feel like I've got that team now around me that you feel confident when you do go for those big projects. When you put that guy on it, schedules are there, it's going to get done right. Whereas in the past, sometimes you had a guy working for you and you think, is he going to be able to achieve what you want? And the last thing you want to do is receive that 100 phone calls from the client, especially complaining about maybe potentially your supervisor. You want to make sure that's a good foundation from the day you turn dirt over.
I think that's a really smart approach, and I like that, because what you're saying there is basically I can't control these other personalities or these other factors, but what I can control is I can control my team. So at least at the end of the day, my inner circle's tight.
Correct.
And if I can control that, then at least I've done all I can on the things that I can control.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's really important.
I always say, a good project manager, they need good people skills. You need to be able to diffuse situations, and you need to be able to deal with trades, owners, architects, a variety of people. So, you need to be able to talk, the Broadmeadows Tyler talk maybe to the Tirac architect talk. You've got to be able to communicate with a variety of people. So you need to be a good people's person to be a good supervisor these days.
I think that's really important, and I want to wrap this up in a sense that we've already spoken at length about that tier one market and the fundamentals and the key attributes that you need to have working in that tier one market. Now, you guys are obviously doing some equally special things in that tier two market as well. So can you sort of explain what you're doing in that market as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think with the building industry, we sort of classify it as, we'll call it a tier three, which would be sort of your volume things. And then we go to tier one. And I think the forgotten baby is sometimes the tier two. And that, when I say tier two, I call that sort of 1.2 million to 2 million range. Sometimes people want to jump from the 800 and shoot for the stars and go to the 4, but they forget about that 2 climb. And I really enjoy that part of the market. I really do. I think majority of the time you'll find a lot of those clients might be that they've built one house before, or they've lived in one and they've saved this dream family home. And I enjoyed just seeing that real appreciation on their faces, especially at handover or during the construction. I'm also involved in that, we'll call it tier two industry, because we do developing on the side. And if I do one tier one development, I'll do 4 tier twos. So I get to see everyone involved in that part of the industry or that part of the sector. And my advice would be for anyone in that tier 3, have a crack at tier 2. It's a good little bubble to be in. It's more of a stepping stone. If you do like that tier 2, it's a small taste of what tier 1 would be, because you're going to have an architect, you're going to have maybe a superintendent running it for a client. And if you go, I love this is what I really enjoy, then have a go at that. But don't go from tier 3 to tier 1. Definitely don't ever do that.
Don't take the leap to basements from single house.
Don't do a double basement if you haven't done a single. It's just all build up.
So what would you describe as a typical, like what are the tier 2 type projects that you're
so basically that would be like a nice dual lock in anywhere from Beaumaris to Bentley and McKinnon, a single dwelling home in Elstonwick for 1.5, a double story, 50 squares. That is a beautiful part of the industry. I just think it really is. It's just good people, always good people are involved in it. And it just seems to run really smooth. But I think it's also a part that can be neglected from a lot of builders. A lot of tier 1 guys will not want to go down to that. But sometimes I say to people, okay, break it down this way. You build a tier 1 house in Tirac, Brighton, anywhere. It goes for 2 years. It goes for 2.5 years. And you make X amount. I can go do a tier 2 and build it in 10 months. So the time, if I build 4 of them in 10 months, technically the time you finish your one tier 1, I've probably built 10. So when you look at sometimes your margin from 10 compared to the 1, and the 1's got a massive opportunity to shit hit the fan, we'll call it. It does.
Yes.
And I know you get to the end of it, sometimes it's just things have gone wrong, or it's not achievable, some things. And you've just glided your way through building these 10 tier 2s, handed the keys over, having a barbecue at their house, and you're still trying to figure out how to get something done at the tier 1. So I think for us, it's a market we'll never leave. So if I had to say, tier 1, we can't go to tier 3. We'll call that $1 million under. Unless it's a reno, we can't facilitate it. It's just too hard. So if I wanted to do tier 2 to tier 1, I'd be saying 30 tier 1, 70 tier 2 at this stage of our career. I just find it's just a smoother process.
And we were talking about it off air before too. The same approach that you have where you want to sort of get in amongst the architects and spend time with these people. You're equally as passionate about dealing with those clients as well in that those projects that you're talking
100%.
about.
We had
whereas most people are running away from that.
Yeah, no, we had a tier 2 architect come in last Thursday, sat down for a good couple of hours, and he showed me a design, and I just said, if you don't trim up some of this design, you're going to be pushing tier 1. You're going to cross the border, and the client's not going to go with the job because it's clearly stated it's where I need to be. This thing had 23 skylights in it on one side of a jewel lock. Now I said, you don't need skylights in the bedroom. It's a real pain in the ass to go to sleep. And you don't need 3 in a cinema room when you're trying to watch a movie and the sun's blaring in. So, we just sharpen up a few of the things in the design, and I know now we'll hit that market, and when it does go out to tender, we'll hit it and it'll start. So there's a lot more opportunity for tier 2 developments and projects to start than tier 1. So if we said there was a strike rate of design of tier 2, design of tier 1, 70% of tier 1s might never get out of the ground. 10% of tier 2s might not get out of the ground. And usually you can bridge that gap by sitting with the client and the architect doing a value management, because the value management might not be miles away. It might just be 100 or 200 grand away. And it could just be changing the joinery, the fixtures and fittings, just real basic things that visually it's still going to be a beautiful home. You don't need a $5,000 bath in a tier 2. You can get a $1,500. You don't need to spend 300 grand on joinery, on George Feather's veneer. We can get you, a Ventec. There's a lot of other options out there.
And that's, again, I keep coming back to it, but that's that practical difference of, I call it a lazy approach, where you have people say, well, yeah, we're just going to tender on this and put it together and it's going to cost X amount of dollars. That's the key difference. With you guys, you're able to look at a tender and look at it from a holistic approach and say, well, look, just because the project's going to cost X amount of dollars, we've actually gone and put some alternatives that will fit the tender. And that's a key difference.
It is a key. And I think it's a good habit for builders to have. If you feel like you are going to tender and you look at something you're going to submit just directly to an owner, take an architect away, an owner's come to you directly with a set of drawings, and you're looking at it at the end and you're thinking to yourself, geez, it just looks a bit off. I've built 8 of these before and they were here and this is a little bit there. Just look through it again, and I sometimes will send a cover letter and going, things to think about if you want to reduce the scope, and just put these items in a list, and you don't have to give dollar value to it. And again, just say, do you need commercial windows in the bedrooms? You might go to a semi-commercial. It'd just be small little items, because I think the approach I've also taken is, because we do a lot of development, we've got to be very budget conscious. I'd love to get a development and say, hey boys, go build it. I'll see you in 12 months, but that's not the reality. You need to know at the end of the development, it's going to cost that much, and you're going to sell it for that much and make that much. You just can't go in blind and say, well, what it comes to, it comes to. So when I do that, when I sit with my architect at the time and we design, I'd be very conscious from that start point to know what sells and what people pay attention to, and what really is just, we'll call it wasting money, we'll call it. No one's going to care if you've got a shadow line 4 meters in the air. They'll just think it's a mistake. You look at it and go, is there a gap up there? Or that's what some people do, where some details, that's what people want. But, I don't need to put a $3,000 kitchen tap in. I swear, if you pull the handle, water will come out on some of these. And they're really good. The ones behind you are really, really good. So, if I said to him, this is what's been, you've selected a $4,000 cooktop and I can get you this one for $1,800, it's about the same. Now, you do that over 20, 30 items in the house.
It's a big difference.
You're pulling back money. And it's a big difference in the tier 2. If you pulled 100 grand out of a $7 million house in a tier 1, the owner's just going to say, well, that's not really helped me out here. But there's only so many things you can pull out of a tier 1. One, you've got to make sure if you pull it out, the owner's going to be happy with it. The majority of the time, they're really happy with the plans that they've been given. So if they're close to budget, they'll just sort of accept that's the direction they've got to go. And if they're miles from budget, well, they won't even bother too much with the value management, because they're too far apart.
It just doesn't work.
It won't work. It won't work. And then you've got to have that uncomfortable conversation. It's quite disheartening in the industry, or a bit sad when they come in and they're so excited at the start, like it's like they're on their honeymoon. They're beaming, and it's like you're the Green Reaper, you know. You're just like, oh, fuck, I've got to tell these guys now that
I've got to deliver some bad news.
It's like they're hopes. You just see that energy be sucked out of them. It's like you can just see it fading away. And you know when they leave, you're just thinking, they leave your door and you're thinking, I'm never going to see you again, because they've lost interest in the industry.
It's crushed.
They've crushed it, you know. And I don't even, and they might call the architect back and give him a mouthful and say, what have you done, sort of thing, and they'll try and spit it. But the reality is, they'll get their folder and they'll just shelve it, and friends will come over in years to come and they'll say, we wanted to build that, but it was not achievable. And by that stage, they've invested 100, 200, 300 grand in the drawings that might not work. So it's like if I said to you, oh, do you like this car? And you go, yeah, it's a beauty. Give me 300 grand. Now, if you turn the key, it might start. It might not, but I want my money first. And if it doesn't start, well, we'll shake hands and go, you lost the bet. You get in the car, it doesn't start. You're not going to turn around and go, oh, punch him on the shoulder, go, good game. You're going to be upset. You're going to be like,
for a long time.
For a long time. And, you know, I've heard some of these guys turn around after and say, well, why don't we do it again? And like, okay, you can help. No. Well, our fee will be a bit lower. You know, you're like, well, why don't you try and help out a bit more? You know, let's get this house built. But by then, it's a fractured relationship. Very rarely they'll want to start the process again, because they'll be thinking in the whole time, is this going to happen again? Because I can't see a builder in this meeting. I can't see, you know, someone here at the start to guide a little bit. And that's why I encourage any architect listening, if you want to have that input at the start, don't feel like you've got to be afraid to pick up the phone or I'm going to turn around and say, no, go away. If you're if you call me from Gippsland or somewhere, I might say, you know, we'll do a Skype call. But if you're around my area and you want me to pop in for an hour, 2, 3 or 4 times, whatever it might be, for me, that's part of my role now of being off the tools, to engage these people and make sure these homes get built.
Yeah, well, look, Michael, it's a real credit to you, and I certainly encourage people to reach out or even better, come into your Bay Street office here in Brighton. And by the way, I've got to say this, but most comfortable chairs I've ever sat in a boardroom meeting, I can tell you, and I sit in a lot, so yeah, very comfortable.
We gave free reign to the interior design on these, and then I got the bill and felt like one of those clients.
Well, they're well worth it, I can assure you. So
appreciate it.
All right, so people listening to this who want to reach out to you and get into contact with you and your team here at MPR, what's the best way to go about it?
Email is probably the best way, or phone call. There's one thing I do is I'll always answer. You will never wait 3, 4, 5 days. It's pretty quick turnaround, which is good and bad, my wife says.
No, look, it's a good quality to have.
I think so in this industry. I think when you make such a big investment into building, it's the biggest investment someone will make in their life. It's not like buying a 30 grand car, or it's a big investment. And a lot of these people, they just want to feel like if they send an email or a phone call, they're going to get a call back or an email back. They're not going to be thinking, where is he? I haven't heard from him in 5 days. I think, and that's one thing I've always tried to instill into my whole team. If someone makes contact, you get back to them. It's not a hard thing. It might just be a 2-minute call. It just might be something, hey Mick, what's happening today? Or not even that, because they've got schedules, but it just might be something real basic, like what do you think of this colour? And I think that will separate you from the other packs.
All right, Michael, well, like I said, I've really enjoyed sitting here and talking to you in your Melbourne office here, and it's a credit to you. So I'm really looking forward to watching this space and seeing what you and your MPR team put together and these exciting projects that are underway. So, yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
No,
it's been great.
No problems at all. And thanks again for coming on to Build Hatch.
Appreciate it.
Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with Michael from MPR Build in Melbourne. I really enjoyed our genuine discussion, and like I said, I love how he leads by example. As usual, please check out our Instagram page and other socials, where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and some of the features of the projects that we talk about. Have a great week, and you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.